If you are hearing this message right now, it is not an accident. Life has chosen you to hear it. You see this because you have already passed the final prosperity test, even if you don't realize it yet. What comes next will reveal why doors you thought were closed will now open, why money will flow more easily to you, and why the opportunities you've prayed for are finally appearing. Stay with me until the end, because what you're about to hear is the key that separates lack from abundance, confusion from clarity, and struggle from prosperity. Prosperity is never born in the world you see around you first. It always begins in the unseen place within. The invisible test that determined whether you were ready for increase was never about what appeared in your bank account or what possessions you held in your hands. It was about what you held in your heart when nothing seemed to work, when the odds seemed against you, when circumstances looked like they were closing in. That was the moment life quietly asked you a question. Will you choose to believe in what you cannot see, or will you collapse under the weight of appearances? Most people do not realize they are being tested. They think delays mean denial, they think setbacks mean failure, and they think emptiness is the proof that abundance is not coming. Yet the truth is the opposite. The unseen law of prosperity requires a proving ground, a place where your faith is weighed against your fear, your words against your doubts, your vision against the shadows of temporary circumstances. The invisible test was placed before you not to break you, but to show you that you are greater than conditions, greater than appearances, greater than lack. You may remember the nights when worry filled your mind, when you asked yourself how much longer you could keep going, when the answers felt distant. That was the furnace of the test. Life was watching not to punish, but to see if you would surrender your inner authority to fear or if you would stand still and trust. The real wealth was not waiting in your outer world. The real wealth was in that single choice. To stand in faith when everything screams otherwise is the highest act of power a human being can perform. It is like planting a seed in dry ground and saying, "I know the rain is coming." You passed because at your lowest moment, you did not fully abandon faith. Even if it was fragile, even if it was a whisper, you chose to believe that supply is unlimited, that something greater is at work, that unseen channels are preparing your good. That choice, however small it looked in the moment, became the doorway. So many give up at that very place. They say to themselves, if nothing is happening, then nothing will ever happen. They quit digging just 3 feet before the treasure. They closed the door just when life was about to deliver. That is why the test is invisible. It reveals the inner substance of a person. True prosperity is not given to those who crumble at the first sight of lack, but to those who dare to believe beyond appearances. You see this message now because you endured, and endurance is the mark of one who is ready. Think about the way the law of nature operates. A farmer does not see the seed sprout immediately, yet he does not dig it up every morning in doubt. He trusts the unseen. He knows the earth is at work though his eyes cannot see. Your test was the same. The soil of your life seemed barren, but you held to the invisible law. You kept planting words of faith. You kept expecting even in silence. You trusted that what you had spoken would take root. That was the invisible test of faith. The question was never whether you could believe when it was easy, but whether you could believe when it was impossible. In those moments you may have felt like you were walking through a wilderness. Every direction looked dry, no signs of water, no evidence of breakthrough. That wilderness was not punishment, it was preparation. It stripped away your dependence on outer evidence and taught you to rely on the inner law. Prosperity does not come by begging circumstances to change. It comes by commanding circumstances through the authority of faith. When you stood still and refused to bow to fear, you proved to the universe that you are no longer a victim of appearances, but a creator in alignment with divine supply. The invisible test was also about your inner dialogue. Did you tell yourself that you were defeated, or did you remind yourself that abundance is your birthright? Every thought was a seed, every inner statement was a declaration, and even in silence life was listening. You began to choose the words that lifted you instead of those that buried you. Even when your lips trembled, even when it seemed foolish, you said, "My supply is on its way. My good cannot be withheld. What is mine by divine right must come." That was the proof of faith. It is easy to think prosperity is measured by numbers, by titles, by possessions, but the deeper truth is that prosperity is first measured by resilience. Could you stand in the storm without running? Could you face emptiness without letting it define you? Could you walk through silence and still know that the song of abundance was already playing? That was the real exam, and you passed it. Now that you look back, you can see that those moments that seemed hardest were actually the markers of your preparation. The invisible test was never about breaking you. It was about unveiling you. It showed you that you are more powerful than doubt, stronger than lack, and capable of holding faith in the face of nothingness. Life gives prosperity not to those who wish for it lightly, but to those who prove through trial that they are ready to hold it, to circulate it, to live it. The beauty of this test is that it was passed in silence. Nobody else may have seen your inner battles, nobody may have clapped for your small victories, but the law of life recorded it all. Every moment you chose faith over fear, expectancy over despair, truth over appearance. You carved your name into the book of prosperity. That is why this message finds you today. You are not here by coincidence. You see this because you already passed. You are now standing at the threshold of increase because you proved in the invisible that you are ready for the visible. Fear has always been the greatest obstacle that stands between a person and their prosperity. It is the shadow that lingers just beyond every opportunity, whispering reasons why it cannot work, why it will not last, why the dream is too big or too far. Fear comes dressed as logic, it presents itself as caution, it pretends to be wisdom, yet its true purpose is to shrink you back into lack. The final test was not whether you had resources, not whether you had connections, not whether you had the perfect plan. The test was whether you could look fear in the face and refuse to bow. Every time you stood at the edge of a decision and felt the tremble of doubt in your chest, every time your mind asked, "What if it all falls apart?" you were being asked to choose between fear and faith. That choice determined your readiness for prosperity more than any outer circumstance could. Fear will always present itself most strongly when you are closest to breakthrough. It shows up in the moment, when you are about to speak the truth of your vision, when you are about to take the step that will change everything, when you are about to align with the law of increase. The test was placed there not to scare you, but to measure your strength. Could you stand still when fear thundered? Could you speak prosperity when fear shouted lack? Could you walk forward when fear told you to turn back? You passed because somewhere deep within, you released the grip fear once had over your life. You stopped giving fear authority. You refused to let fear write the story of your destiny. That moment of release was the proof that you were ready to rise into greater supply. Think of how fear has worked in your life before. It came through thoughts of scarcity. What if there is not enough? It came through thoughts of unworthiness. Who am I to have this much? It came through thoughts of failure. What if I lose everything? And yet in each of those moments, you began to replace the voice of fear with a higher voice. You began to say to yourself, "There is always enough. I am worthy. I cannot lose what belongs to me by divine right." This replacement was not just positive thinking. It was an act of spiritual authority. It was the conscious decision to dethrone fear and enthrone truth. Every time you did this, you passed a portion of the test. Prosperity is not a reward for those who never feel fear. It is a reward for those who master fear. The difference between a person who lives in lack and one who walks in abundance is not that one never hears the voice of fear, but that one refuses to obey it. Fear will still knock, but you no longer open the door. That is what you proved. The grip has been broken because you no longer confuse fear with truth. You learn to see fear as nothing more than a shadow, a hollow echo, a lie with no real substance. The moment you understood that fear has no power except the power you give it, you broke free. Life presented situations to test this understanding. Perhaps you stood in front of a financial decision, feeling uncertain if you could handle it, and instead of retreating, you said yes. Perhaps you faced the possibility of loss, and instead of collapsing, you declared gain. Perhaps you stood alone with no visible support, and instead of panicking, you affirmed that unseen supply is greater than visible evidence. Each one of these was a victory over fear. Each one was a sign that you were passing the test. The release of fear also opened your energy. When fear rules, the body tightens, the mind closes, opportunities shrink away. But when fear is released, you feel an opening, a freedom, a sense of flow. Prosperity requires flow. Money, ideas, opportunities, and relationships move toward those who are open, not those who are clenched. That is why fear was the obstacle. It closed the gates. By releasing fear, you opened the gates. That opening is what allows prosperity to rush in. Fear is always tied to control. It demands that you know every step, that you have every guarantee, that you hold tight to every outcome. But prosperity is a law of trust, not control. The test came when you were asked to take steps without guarantees, to believe without evidence, to release what you could not control. At first this felt impossible, but as you practiced, it became freedom. The moment you let go of control, you felt the burden lift. You realized prosperity was never about forcing outcomes, but about trusting the law to deliver what is rightfully yours. That realization was the breaking of chains. Fear also disguises itself as the voice of the past. It reminds you of times you tried and failed, times you lost, times you struggled. It replays those old scenes to convince you that the future will be the same. The test required you to silence the past. You had to declare, "That was then, this is now. I am not bound by old patterns. My future is not written by my past." By declaring this, you severed the link that fear used to hold you. You chose to live in expectancy instead of memory. That was the signal that you were ready for prosperity. As you released fear, something else began to grow: confidence. Not the confidence that comes from outer achievements, but the confidence that comes from inner alignment. You began to feel a sense of knowing that no matter what the surface looks like, supply is moving beneath it. This knowing became stronger than the voice of fear. It became your anchor. And with that anchor, you no longer trembled at outer appearances. Fear could knock, but it could not shake you. That steadiness is the true mark of prosperity consciousness. The final test was not whether you could gather riches while holding fear in your heart. Many people have money yet live in terror of losing it. That is not prosperity. True prosperity is freedom from fear itself. It is the peace of knowing that supply is endless, that life is abundant, that you are connected to an infinite source. The invisible test asked you to choose peace over panic, expectancy over dread, vision over limitation, and by choosing peace, you unlocked abundance. You proved you are ready not just to receive prosperity, but to hold it, to circulate it, to multiply it. Every time you replaced fear with faith, you shifted the vibration of your life. That shift is why new doors are opening. That shift is why supply is appearing. That shift is why you are hearing this now. You stand on the other side of fear's grip, and in that freedom, prosperity recognizes you as its own. The test of prosperity is always connected to the words that leave your mouth, because words carry life, power, and direction. Every phrase you speak sends out a signal, either calling in abundance or pushing it away. The invisible law has always been exact in this matter. You reap what you speak. The final prosperity test measured not what you said when everything was easy, but what you declared when life pressed against you. When lack seemed loud, when worry rose like a tide, when circumstances tempted you to complain, the law waited to see what words you would choose. Would you align with appearances and speak of emptiness, or would you align with truth and speak of supply? You are here now because you chose rightly. You began to discipline your tongue. You refused to let words of defeat pass through your lips unchecked. You chose to speak as if prosperity were already established, and that choice shifted everything. Many people fail this test because they believe words are harmless. They say things carelessly, not realizing that each sentence is a seed planted in the soil of life. Seeds do not care whether they are weeds or roses, they only know how to grow. When a person says, "I never have enough," that seed takes root. When they complain, "Money always slips through my fingers," that seed takes root. When they declare, "Opportunities never come my way," that seed takes root. Soon the garden of their life becomes filled with weeds they planted themselves. But you began to change this. You recognized that words are not casual, they are creative. You stopped sowing weeds and you began sowing roses. You started to say, "My supply is endless. Money flows to me easily. Opportunities chase me down. Everything I need is already prepared." Each of these words was a seed, and each seed carried the power to manifest. That was the test, and you passed. The power of the spoken word lies in its vibration. Every word carries a frequency, and that frequency attracts matching conditions. Words of lack call lack. Words of abundance call abundance. Words of fear call situations that confirm fear. Words of faith call circumstances that reveal faith's reward. The test measured whether you would let your tongue be guided by appearances or by divine truth. In the moment of pressure, when it felt easier to complain, you chose to declare. That was your victory. You understood that complaining is an investment in more problems, while declaring is an investment in solutions. By choosing declaration over complaint, you turned the tide of your life. Consider how this test often appears. You might wake up with bills on your table and the temptation to sigh and say, "I'll never get out of this." But instead you said, "My supply is greater than this bill. The law of abundance provides." You might face rejection and feel tempted to say, "No one wants what I offer." But instead, you said, "The right people are being drawn to me now." You might feel physically weary and tempted to speak defeat, but instead, you declared renewal. These choices may have seemed small at the time, but each one was part of the final exam. They proved you understood the creative law of words. The reason words are so powerful is that they bypass the surface and plant themselves directly in the subconscious mind. The subconscious accepts them as commands and begins arranging circumstances to match. This is why idle speech is dangerous. It programs lack without awareness. But once you became conscious of this truth, you guarded your words as treasures. You became careful, deliberate, intentional. You understood that every word is a command to life, and you began to speak as a commander, not a beggar. That shift from begging to commanding was the very essence of the prosperity test. Another layer of this test was consistency. It was not enough to speak affirmations once and then return to words of lack. The law required proof of discipline. Could you continue declaring abundance even when nothing appeared to change? Could you keep speaking life when silence answered back? Could you repeat truth until it became the only language you knew? This was the crucible. Many start strong but fall back into complaint. You endured. You kept your words aligned even when days felt long. That endurance built momentum, and momentum opened the gates of manifestation. The spoken word also carries authority beyond your personal life. Every word you speak affects the atmosphere around you. People feel it, situations respond to it, environments shift under it. When you speak prosperity, you do not just shape your own destiny, you influence the space you walk into. That is why the law tested you in conversations with others. When friends spoke lack, did you join them, or did you quietly hold to truth? When others declared defeat, did you agree, or did you sow seeds of victory? You passed because you learned not to echo the language of fear. You became a voice of abundance, even in a chorus of lack. The test also asked whether you would speak against yourself. Self-condemning words are some of the most destructive because they are spoken with conviction. When you say, "I always fail," you curse your own path. When you say, "I can't handle wealth," you block your own increase. Life waited to see if you would release these patterns, and you did. You began to affirm your worthiness, your ability, your readiness. You began to say, "I am capable. I am chosen. I am ready for overflow." These declarations rewrote your inner script and opened doors that had long been closed. The more you practiced, the more you saw the results. Small changes began to appear: unexpected money, opportunities you did not chase, favor in surprising places. These were not coincidences, they were echoes of your words returning. The law was proving itself. It was showing you that the harvest of speech is inevitable. The more you saw, the more confident you became. This confidence multiplied your words' power, because belief energizes speech. You no longer spoke as a trial, you spoke as a certainty. That certainty is the signature of prosperity consciousness. The test of words is not finished in a single day. It is a lifelong practice. Yet you reached the level required for breakthrough. You proved that your mouth no longer serves fear, that your tongue no longer sows lack. You proved that you understand the sacred nature of language. The test was never about silence, it was about mastery. And mastery has been demonstrated. Your words now align with truth, and truth always manifests in time. Struggle has long been mistaken as the pathway to prosperity, as if endless labor and grinding effort are the only way to unlock abundance. Many people have been conditioned to believe that if they are not worn down, exhausted, and constantly fighting, then they are not worthy of success. Yet the final test revealed something entirely different. Prosperity does not answer to struggle, it answers to alignment. The harder you tried to force, the further it seemed to slip away. The more you clung with desperation, the more elusive it appeared. The test was never about how much you could push, how much you could strain, or how much you could sacrifice. It was about whether you could let go of the belief that struggle is necessary, and instead learn to flow with the rhythm of life. The test asked, can you trust that what is yours will come without the constant battle? Can you rest in the assurance that prosperity is a natural law and not something you must chase endlessly? Think of how many times you felt the weight of striving. You woke with the thought that you must do more, work harder, run faster, push stronger, or else you would fall behind. That belief made you feel like life was a competition where only the most exhausted could win. Yet every time you pushed beyond alignment, you found yourself drained, anxious, and further from the very prosperity you desired. That was the illusion of struggle. It promised reward but delivered depletion. The final test came when you faced that illusion and chose to step out of it. You stopped equating struggle with worthiness. You stopped glorifying exhaustion. You recognized that prosperity does not flow to the desperate, but to the aligned. Alignment means coming into harmony with the invisible law of supply. It means recognizing that abundance is not created by your force alone, but by your agreement with the divine current that already exists. When you align with that current, opportunities appear without strain, solutions arrive without panic, doors open without pounding. The test measured whether you would cling to the old belief in struggle or surrender to the truth of flow. When you released the need to prove yourself through hardship, you passed. Struggle also creates an energy of resistance. The more you fight, the more you send a signal of lack. You tell the universe, I do not trust that there is enough for me, so I must wrestle for scraps. That vibration attracts more struggle, more obstacles, more reasons to fight. Prosperity, on the other hand, responds to trust, calmness, expectancy, and openness. By letting go of struggle, you stopped broadcasting desperation and began broadcasting readiness. The moment you shifted your energy, you shifted your results. Many are afraid to release struggle because they think it means becoming passive, doing nothing, or giving up effort. But letting go of struggle is not the same as letting go of action. Action remains, but it is no longer frantic or forced. It is inspired, aligned, directed. When you are aligned, you know which step to take, and that step carries far more power than 1,000 steps taken in exhaustion. The test required you to learn this difference. Could you still take action without the anxiety of struggle? Could you move forward with peace instead of panic? When you proved that you could, you unlocked a higher dimension of prosperity. The world often praises the image of the weary worker who sacrifices everything for success, but rarely does it show the peace of the one who aligns and attracts with grace. You discovered that grace is more powerful than grind. Grace allows you to be in the right place at the right time, to meet the right people, to receive the right ideas. Grace makes doors swing open with less effort. That was the lesson of the test. that prosperity is not earned by punishment, but received through partnership with divine flow. The moments that revealed this most clearly were often when you were forced to stop. Perhaps circumstances made it impossible to push any harder. Perhaps your body or your spirit refused to continue in exhaustion. In that stillness, you discovered that things could move without your constant battle. Opportunities arrived even when you were resting. Ideas came in silence, not in chaos. Support appeared when you least expected it. Those moments proved that prosperity is not dependent on struggle, and the test was whether you would notice. You did. You saw that release is more fruitful than resistance. Struggle also comes from fear. The fear of not having enough, the fear of being left behind, the fear of missing out. That fear drives people to overwork, overthink, and overexert. But you were asked to face that fear and dismantle it. You realized that there is no shortage, no race, no competition for what is yours. You realized that your supply is individual, prepared, and protected. That realization loosened your grip and released your frantic pace. It allowed you to move with calm assurance, knowing that you cannot miss what belongs to you. As you let go of struggle, you also discovered joy. Struggle steals joy by making every step feel heavy, every task feel burdensome, every day feel like a fight. But prosperity flows best through joy. When you enjoy your work, when you find delight in your actions, when you approach life with gratitude, you align with the current of increase. Joy is a magnet for abundance. The test revealed whether you could replace struggle with joy, whether you could choose to find lightness even when the world expected heaviness. By choosing joy, you proved that you trust the process. The more you let go of struggle, the more creative you became. Struggle narrows the mind, keeping it locked in survival mode. Flow opens the mind, allowing inspiration, vision, and innovation to rise. Many of the best ideas come not in the hours of grinding, but in the moments of stillness. The final test asked whether you could make room for this inspiration, whether you could allow yourself to stop pushing long enough to receive. You did, and in doing so, you opened the channel for ideas that will carry you further than struggle ever could. Releasing struggle also reshaped your relationship with time. Struggle makes time feel scarce, like there is never enough. Flow reveals that time expands when you are aligned. What once took you hours in strain now takes minutes in inspiration. What once felt like a mountain becomes a simple step. This shift in time perception was another proof of your passing. You no longer feared running out of time, because you saw that time bends in your favor when you align with divine order. The law of prosperity was never trying to make you wary. It was waiting for you to understand that abundance is your natural state, not something you must wrestle into being. The test was placed before you to free you from the belief that exhaustion is noble, that suffering is required, that grinding is holy. You passed because you learned to trust the unseen rhythm, to let go of frantic effort, to allow life to carry you forward. That choice marked the shift from struggle to alignment, from resistance to flow, from exhaustion to abundance. Prosperity is never one-sided. It is a circulation, a movement, a flow. It cannot be hoarded, it cannot be trapped, it cannot be held with a clenched fist. The final test of prosperity always comes when life asks, can you give even when it feels uncomfortable? Can you release something from your hand even when it looks like you have little left? Many people fail here because fear tells them that giving will make them lose. Fear whispers that if they let go of even a small portion, there will not be enough for tomorrow. But prosperity operates by a higher law, the law of circulation. What you release returns multiplied, what you hold in fear diminishes. What you give freely becomes the channel through which more flows back to you. You are here now because you passed this test. You gave when you could have clung. You trusted the principle of circulation, and by trusting, you opened the door for greater increase. The essence of this test is not the amount given but the spirit behind it. A person can give a little with fear and see no return, or give much with resentment and find no blessing. But when you give with joy, with expectancy, with trust that what you release is not lost but multiplied, then the circulation begins its work. Life asked you, Will you give from faith or from fear? You answered with faith. That is why prosperity has marked you as ready. Think of the moments that brought you to this point. Perhaps you were asked to help someone in need when your own supply seemed low. Perhaps you were guided to sow into a cause or a vision that felt bigger than yourself. Perhaps you felt the nudge to give kindness, encouragement, or time when you thought you had little left to spare. Each of those moments was a doorway to the test. The question was never about how much, it was about whether you believed in the endlessness of supply. When you gave, you proved that you understood. The universe does not run out, and what you release does not leave your life but prepares the way for return. Prosperity cannot enter a life that is closed. When the hands are clenched, nothing can flow in and nothing can flow out. But when the hands are open, both giving and receiving become possible. Your test was to open your hands even when appearances said, "Hold tight." You chose to trust instead of clutch. That single act aligned you with the law of abundance. By giving, you demonstrated that you no longer live from fear of loss, but from confidence in supply. There is a rhythm to life that reflects this principle everywhere. The ocean does not cling to its waves, it releases them again and again, and yet more waves rise. The trees do not hoard their leaves, they release them every season, and yet new life returns stronger. The earth gives, the sky gives, the rivers give, and none of them are depleted. In fact, their giving is what sustains their abundance. You began to see yourself in the same rhythm. You realized that giving is not subtraction, it is multiplication. The test was whether you would align with this rhythm or resist it. Your choice to give proved your readiness to flow with life's eternal circulation. Giving is also an act of self-definition. When you give, you declare, "I am not poor, I am not empty, I am not lacking. I am abundant, I am overflowing, I am connected to infinite supply." Even when appearances seemed small, your act of giving declared that you saw yourself as rich in spirit. That declaration was more powerful than any outer figure. Life responded not to the number in your hand, but to the truth in your heart. Because you identified with abundance, abundance identified with you. This test also revealed whether you could trust timing. Many people give only when it is convenient, when there is an excess they do not need. But the test often comes when it is least convenient, when it stretches you, when it feels like the wrong time. That is when the law watches closely. Can you give when it feels costly? Can you trust that the channel of return is already prepared? You did, and in doing so you proved that you understand the deeper principle: there is never a wrong time to circulate good. Because circulation always guarantees return. Your giving was not limited to money. Prosperity tests the heart in many ways. Did you give forgiveness where bitterness tried to grow? Did you give encouragement where silence would have been easier? Did you give patience when frustration pressed on you? These forms of giving are as vital as financial giving. They clear the channel of your life so that abundance can move freely. Every time you released kindness instead of withholding it, you proved that you were circulating good. And circulation of good always returns multiplied. The test also revealed whether you could give without expectation of repayment from the same source. Many people give only when they know they will receive back from the same hand. But prosperity's law rarely works that way. What you release through one channel may return through another. When you gave freely, without controlling how it would return, you aligned with this truth. You proved that you trust the law itself, not the particular people or channels involved. That trust freed you from disappointment and kept your circulation pure. Every time you gave, even in secret, even when no one saw, the law recorded it. Nothing released in faith is ever lost. The invisible record of your giving became the evidence that you were ready for more. Life never withholds from the generous, because the generous create the conditions for overflow. That is why this message has found you. You gave, and now it is time to receive. Giving is not depletion, it is preparation. A farmer who releases seed into the soil is not losing anything, though it looks like loss in the moment. He is setting himself up for a multiplied harvest. In the same way, your giving prepared your future. Each act was a seed, Each release was a planting, and now the law guarantees that your harvest must come. The test was whether you would trust the season between planting and harvest, whether you would believe even when the field looked empty. You did, and that is why the field of your life is about to bloom. Through this test, you learned one of the greatest truths: you are not the source, you are the channel. Prosperity does not originate with you, it flows through you. When you gave, you affirmed that truth. You stopped clinging as if supply was limited, and you began circulating as if supply was endless. That shift in perspective changed everything. It marked you as one who understands the law, one who is safe to bless with greater increase, because you will not dam the river but keep it flowing. The final prosperity test is always the test of vision. Life asks, can you see beyond what is in front of you? Can you hold the picture of abundance when appearances shout lack? Can you keep your eyes fixed on the unseen supply rather than the visible limitation? This test is subtle but powerful, because everything in the outer world tries to convince you to doubt. Bills may pile, doors may seem closed, opportunities may appear delayed. Yet in that very moment, the invisible realm holds infinite possibilities waiting to be called forth. The test is whether you will be ruled by sight or by vision, by what is happening now or by what is eternally true. Passing this test means you no longer measure your future by the temporary. You measure it by the eternal law of abundance that never changes. You see beyond what is to what can be, and in that seeing, you create the condition for manifestation. Vision is the inner blueprint that shapes the outer form. Without vision, life becomes reactive, tossed by appearances, swayed by circumstance. But with vision, you become anchored, steady, unshaken even when storms rise. The test comes when the vision seems delayed, when the evidence is not yet visible. Do you hold it or do you abandon it? Many let go just before the harvest, because they cannot bear the gap between planting and reaping. But those who hold vision pass into the realm of mastery. They understand that delay is not denial, and that what is unseen is more powerful than what is seen. You are here because you passed that test. You kept believing when others doubted. You kept affirming when others complained. You kept picturing abundance when lack tried to dominate your imagination. Your vision became your shield. When worry tried to whisper, "It will not work out," your vision answered, "It already has." When doubt tried to paint pictures of failure, your vision drew images of increase. When fear told you that you might lose, your vision showed you that you were already gaining. This inner seeing was not fantasy, it was faith. It was the ability to see with the eyes of spirit instead of the eyes of flesh. That seeing is the highest prosperity test, because everything in the visible tries to make you blind to the truth of the invisible. But you refused to be blinded. You trained your mind to see wealth, health, opportunity, favor, and growth even before they appeared, and by doing so you became a magnet for them. Vision also requires discipline. The test was whether you could direct your imagination or let it run wild. Imagination is powerful. It creates images that shape reality. If it is left unchecked, it can build pictures of fear, failure, and scarcity that block prosperity from flowing. But when disciplined, imagination becomes the canvas of abundance. You proved that you could discipline it. You stopped rehearsing worst-case scenarios and began painting best-case outcomes. You shifted from worry to wonder, from dread to expectancy. That discipline transformed your inner world, and your inner world became the seedbed of your outer increase. Vision is not passive, it is active. To hold vision is to live as if it were already true. You walked with the energy of prosperity before the evidence came. You spoke words of increase when nothing seemed to increase. You carried yourself with the posture of abundance even when resources looked small. That alignment between vision and action sent a signal to life itself you were ready for more. Life does not release increase to those who deny it in word and action. But to those who embody it before it arrives, life has no choice but to deliver. Your embodiment of the vision marked you as one who understands the law. The test of vision is also a test of patience. Patience is not waiting in despair, it is waiting in assurance. It is the calm confidence that knows the seed will sprout at the appointed time. Many fail here because they confuse silence with absence, delay with denial. But you knew better. You trusted the process. You let the seed grow in the unseen soil of time, and you held your vision steady while it matured. That patience proved that you are not driven by appearances but anchored in truth. It proved that you understand the rhythm of prosperity, which always delivers at the right time. Every challenge that came to you was a mirror asking, "Will you still see abundance here?" When a door closed, the test asked, "Can you see a better one opening?" When resources ran low, the test asked, "Can you see the hidden supply ready to emerge?" When others doubted you, the test asked, "Can you see yourself succeeding even when no one else does?" You answered yes again and again. That is why the vision has carried you to this point. Life now knows that you will not abandon your picture of abundance, no matter what tries to cloud it. You are safe to bless with more because you see beyond appearances. Vision also determines speech. The test was not only what you saw in your mind, but what you spoke with your mouth. Did your words match your vision, or did they betray it? Many people cancel their own abundance by speaking lack while trying to hold prosperity in thought. But you aligned your words with your vision. You spoke increase, not decrease. You affirmed life, not loss. You declared favor, not failure. Each word was a brushstroke painting the vision more vividly until it became undeniable. By speaking your vision, you called it forth. Vision expands you. It stretches you to imagine more, to expect more, to prepare for more. The test was whether you would shrink your vision to fit appearances or expand your vision to match infinite supply. You chose expansion. You did not lower your picture to what seemed possible. You lifted it to what felt impossible and trusted that life would provide. That courage to hold a large vision is the mark of true prosperity, because prosperity is never small. It is always greater, fuller, more abundant than the mind can first conceive. By holding a big vision, you aligned with the infinite, and the infinite always responds in kind. You also discovered that vision is contagious. As you held it, others began to see through your eyes. Your faith inspired theirs, your expectancy lifted theirs, your inner picture expanded theirs. Prosperity is not only personal, it overflows. When you passed this test, you became a light to others, a living proof that vision creates reality. You did not just hold the vision for yourself, you became a carrier of vision for everyone around you. That influence is part of your reward, because life blesses those who bless others through their example. The final prosperity test was this: could you see abundance where others saw lack, hold faith where others gave up, imagine increase where others settled for less? And you did. You proved that your vision is stronger than appearances, your imagination more powerful than fear, your faith greater than circumstance. This is why you have been marked ready, why you see this message now, why the flow of abundance is no longer delayed in your life. You passed the test of vision, and passing it means that everything you have seen within must now begin to take form without